Hi everyone, Lee Pacchia from Mimesis Law here. We're coming to you from New York Law School today, where we're talking with Professor Deborah Archer. She is going to be talking to us about the grand jury system in light of the cases of Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and others. Professor, thanks for joining us today. Welcome. So we've had a number of cases in recent months that have been in the prime spotlight of the media. They haven't been happy events by any stretch of the imagination, but we've essentially seen in the incidents of the police killings of Eric Garner and Michael Brown, non-indictments come to pass. Looking at the system from a removed perspective, 35,000 feet up, how did things go? Did the system do its job?
So just to look at the connection between all of the incidents you've mentioned and the many, many more that there have been, it hasn't been happy events. But what has come from that is some good conversation. People are starting to talk about race in a way that they weren't talking about race before. People are talking about interactions between the police and minority communities in a way that they haven't been before. And we're seeing protests and people speaking out, which to me means that the community, although they have lost, maybe have lost faith in the criminal justice system, have not lost hope that there's room for change, and they're engaged and alive and they're active. And I think that we have a real opportunity to make progress as a result of these real tragedies.
Yeah, we saw the DA in the Michael Brown case, Rob McCullough, out in Ferguson, addressing St. Louis University Law School about the grand jury process. There is a lot of criticism about what exactly happened there. There's also criticism in the Eric Garner case about what happened there. Is this a time where we should be re-examining the way this process works?
I think it's healthy to re-examine any process that has such a deep and profound impact on people's lives and their liberties and their rights. So absolutely we should be taking a look at the grand jury process and whether there's room for reform. One piece that I think we can't ignore when we look at the very specific proposals for reform is that the grand jury doesn't operate free from the influence of all of the factors that influence general society. They're not immune to the factors that influence everyday citizens and civilians, and neither is the police department. So the grand jury was not immune from systemic racism. They're not immune from implicit bias. And that's the piece of the conversation that's not happening when we talk about reforming the grand jury system. Is the race is a thread through all of these cases that we're seeing, and we need to talk about how race has impacted the police department and how race impacts the grand jury system.
Well, a lot of people point to, in terms of specific changes that could be made, a little bit more transparency. DAs don't have to really release anything in terms of what happens behind closed doors when a grand jury is in proceedings. How much, in your opinion, would transparency in this process help?
So I don't know that transparency would change outcomes, but transparency often is a catalyst to everyday citizens having more faith in the process and supporting the process. So part of the problem is that people don't know what happened in those rooms. They don't know what evidence was presented. They don't know how it was presented. And so allowing folks to have a peek inside the grand jury room and see that there may be factors that they don't know, to see that there were arguments made that they weren't aware of, may help people have more faith in what's going on in that room. But I don't think that would change the outcome in some of these cases.
These stories, looking at them as an outsider and someone who works in media, it's hard for me to separate the racial issues from political issues. DAs, of course, unfortunately, are political animals, and I'm wondering to what extent do you think politics played a role in the process, not only in the Michael Brown and the Eric Garner cases, but also we have a Kai Gurley, which was a totally different set of facts and circumstances, but that DA in Brooklyn, the name is escaping me now, has Ken Thompson has a very different political outlook from the DA in Staten Island. And again, different cases, vastly different outcomes. what's the proper role to assess for politics when we look at a process like this?
Well, I think most folks would say that politics shouldn't have any role in the criminal justice process, that we should be looking to protect everyone's rights equally, to protect all of our communities equally. Between Staten Island and what happened in Brooklyn, one difference is one happened in Staten Island and one happened in Brooklyn. Very different communities, very different perspective on how police interact with communities, and a very different pool from which to draw grand jurors. So I think we have to acknowledge that the venue for the grand jury played a role. Certainly, I think some folks in Staten Island may have a different lens through which they view police-community interactions than many of the communities in Brooklyn do.
Professor, thank you so much for stopping by and talking to us.
Okay, thank you.
That's Professor Deborah Archer from New York Law School. If you'd like to see more of the stuff they're working on, be sure to go check them out at nyls.edu. I'm Lee Pacchia. Thanks for watching. See you next time.